Hey there, welcome back. So I want to give a little bit of a discussion about defense mechanisms. So here's the deal. If the demands of the id or the superego threaten to overwhelm the ego, Freud says that we have a lot of anxiety. So id wants to sleep with coworker, superego says absolutely not, totally wrong, immoral, don't do that, you're going to hurt your wife. Then you've got a lot of anxiety, right? Because you have these two conflicting urges, the urge to sleep with your coworker and the urge to be a good person. And so what's going to happen is defense mechanisms will be used in order to reduce the anxiety. So let's take a look at the major defense mechanisms, and then I'll put in another video. You can watch it or not, but some people find the defense mechanisms a little bit difficult. So I just want to give you lots of opportunities to think through them. So let's think through repression. Repression is the complete exclusion from consciousness of anxiety-producing thoughts, feelings, or impulses. It is the most basic defense mechanism. Repression is unconscious. We don't deliberately repress any information from our minds or any experiences. We might suppress them. That's different. If I suppress something, then I'm deliberately pushing it out of consciousness. But that's not repression. Repression is where it is the mind itself is so overwhelmed by something that it pushes it out of consciousness without you even being aware. So, for example, 3 years after being hospitalized for back surgery, a man can remember only vague details of the event. So amnesia is often thought to be caused by repression. I think I repressed a memory once. I was in grad school, and I don't have a memory of it, but I can tell you the story because my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, tells me the story. I was living in this really terrible apartment building because I was in grad school and I was very poor, and it was all I could afford. And this was campus housing, so there were a lot of undergrads there, and, ugh. Anyway, the undergrads were very noisy and drank a lot, and anyway, these girls came down the hallway one time and said to me, "Hey, can we borrow your vacuum?" And I'm like, oh gosh, this is not good. I had worked for 5 years before going back to graduate school, so I had like a decent vacuum, and I didn't really want to give them my vacuum because I thought these girls are going to like vacuum up vomit or something with it. I didn't want to give it to them. But in the end I did because I was trying to be a good person. And I thought to myself, well, if somebody asks you for your shirt, give them your coat too. And so that's what I did. And I said, okay, here's the vacuum. You're welcome to use it. And they didn't bring it back to me. Days went by, no vacuum. And so finally one day I walked down the hallway and knocked on the door. And here's where I don't remember it. I have no memory of what happened next, but apparently I told my husband, and he says that what happened was they opened it just a little tiny bit, and then I asked for the vacuum, and they yelled "F you" and slammed the door in my face and brought it back like several days later, in fact smelling like vomit. So I don't remember that part. I must have repressed it. I'm sure it happened because my husband remembers me telling him about it. Okay, there's repression. Displacement, the redirection of emotional impulses toward a substitute person or object, usually one less threatening or dangerous than the original source of the conflict. Okay, that's a lot. Let me give you some examples. Angered by a neighbor's hateful comment, a mother spanks her daughter for spilling her milk. Okay, what's going on there? The mother is mad at the neighbor. The mother has emotional impulses. She's redirecting them toward a substitute person. She spanks her daughter for just a little accident because she's really mad at her neighbor. But if she's mad at her neighbor, can she act out against her neighbor? Superego is going to be like, don't do that. You can't do that. Not okay. You're going to have bad relations. And so the mother spanks her daughter, takes it out on somebody else, somebody who is less threatening than the neighbor. If you have ever had an older brother or sister speak negatively to you, push you, shove you, hit you because they were really mad at mom or dad or teacher or friend, you were the object of displacement. I grew up in Iowa for a couple of years when I was a kid, and the neighbor had the cutest Cocker Spaniel, but he would come home every day and kick that dog, and I hated it. I hated it so much. I was 10. I created a fake letterhead on our old sort of really basic computer and wrote a fake letter from animal control saying that he shouldn't do that and that his dog might be taken from him. And then I put it in his mailbox. So I don't know if he ever knew that I did that. Nothing ever happened from that. But he was displacing his anger probably at work or toward his boss onto his dog. A less threatening or dangerous object. Okay, sublimation. This is one of the healthiest forms of defense mechanism. This is where a form of displacement where sexual urges are rechanneled into productive non-sexual activities. So a graduate student works on her thesis 14 hours a day while her husband is on an extended business trip. So sublimation is usually sexual urges. Potentially it could be something else. But you're taking, for Freud, it's almost always sex and aggression. So, husband is on a trip, spouse is on a trip. And so then you begin to work really hard. You build a new garden in the backyard. You spend extra time at work. Rationalization is justifying your actions or feelings with socially acceptable explanations, rather than consciously acknowledging your true motives or desires. Justifying your actions with a socially acceptable explanation rather than acknowledging what's really going on. So after being rejected by a prestigious university, a student says he's glad because he would be happier at a smaller, less competitive college. Gosh, we do this all the time. You get... Yeah, that rejection from college thing is hitting home for me right now. My kids are almost college age, and it's going to be a real big one. Maybe you don't get your dream job in New York City, but you get a different job here in DFW, and you say, you know what, I wouldn't really want to move that far away after all. It would be expensive, and there's crime, and the weather is so cold, and I'm happier here, things like that. Projection is the attribution of your own unacceptable urges or qualities onto others. So whatever is bad about you, you now say that that's what's going on with other people. So a married woman who's sexually attracted to her coworker accuses him of flirting with her. She really likes him, and she's like, why are you flirting with me? If you've seen examples of this, somebody... I thought of an example, but I'm hesitant to say it. What about you want to, you're really mad at your neighbor because their dog barks like 24 hours a day, wakes you up at 4 a.m. and midnight, and so you really want to like hurt them in some way, and then you accuse your spouse of somehow wanting to hurt them, something like that, where you say you're the one, but you're really the one who has those kind of unacceptable urges. Okay, reaction formation, thinking or behaving in a way that is the extreme opposite of unacceptable urges or impulses. So, example, threatened by an awakening sexual attraction to girls, an adolescent boy goes out of his way to tease and torment adolescent girls. Guys, this happens all the time. Hannah, my daughter, went to kindergarten, and this little boy, Zane, punched her in the stomach at recess the first week of school. I think probably what was going on was that he probably liked her, but he didn't know how to deal with that, and so he punched her instead. My dad did this to my mom. They went to elementary school, and they went to all the years of school together, and that was back in the days when you had the desks where you could prop up the lid with your ruler, and she would prop up the lid with her ruler, and he would go by and smack the ruler out so that the lid would fall on her head, and kind of torment her in that way. He was acting in the extreme opposite way of how he really felt, because what really was going on was that he liked her. You got to be careful with this one. I was hesitant to say to Hannah, he just likes you, because you don't want her to think, oh, if a guy likes me, he'll hit me. But we did talk through it, and it got dealt with. Denial. The failure to recognize or acknowledge the existence of anxiety-provoking information. So, despite having multiple drinks every night, a man says he's not an alcoholic because he never drinks before 5 p.m. You've seen lots of people who are in denial about something. They're spending too much time on social media. They're spending too much money. They're not studying enough, and they will just absolutely deny it, even though there's abundant evidence. Undoing is a very interesting one. This is a form of unconscious repentance that involves neutralizing or atoning for an unacceptable action or thought with a second action or thought. Okay, that's a mouthful, but let me give you an example. A woman gets a tax refund by cheating on her taxes, and then she feels terrible about it. Superego is like, you shouldn't have done that. So then on Sunday, she makes a larger than usual donation to in the church plate on the following Sunday. So she probably isn't even conscious of this. It's not that you give the money back to the IRS. It's that you do something to try to atone for it with a different action. So, and this could be like maybe you're mean to your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and so then the following Sunday you make like a big breakfast for them. That's undoing. Or you were harsh with your child, and so then you take them out for ice cream. We actually do see this with battered women, that the man will try to undo what he did by offering to take her out or buy her something to undo the abuse that he gave. Regression is retreating to a behavior pattern characteristic of an earlier stage of development. I don't think regression happens as often as it's popularized to be thought of, but it can happen. So after the parents' bitter divorce, a 10-year-old girl refuses to sleep alone in a room and crawls into bed with her mother. Very common that when a new baby is born, an older child, a toddler who was previously potty trained will start wetting the bed, or will start sucking the thumb, or will need to be held like a baby more often. And that's because of anxiety over desire for that new baby to go away so that the child can be the apple of his mother's and father's eyes again. Okay, so by resorting to these largely unconscious, most of this is unconscious. You're probably not even aware that you're doing it. Self-deceptions, the ego can maintain an integrated sense of self while searching for a more acceptable and realistic solution to a conflict between the id and the superego. So you've got this conflict between id and superego. You're very uncomfortable about this. You engage in the defense mechanism until you can find a solution. Repression is the most fundamental ego defense mechanisms, and others are used if repression fails. Sublimation is the most helpful. Remember, when we sublimate, we take whatever negative energy we have and we put it into something productive, like work or exercise, art. Denial is absolutely the least helpful. Being in denial about a problem, that can go on for a very long time, and that is the worst one to engage in. The short-term use of defense mechanisms is probably helpful. To do this a little bit is fine. To do it for the long haul is not fine. You'll end up with some difficulties from that. Okay, so that's our discussion of the defense mechanisms. I do want you to try to understand these, so I do strongly encourage you to watch the next video that I did not create. I'll put one in there for you from somebody else to give you a little refresher, and I'm also going to give you a quiz on this. So use your study guide. Your study guide is your friend, because I'm not going to ask you to have all of them down. I'll give you I'll narrow it down for you a little bit, because I'm nice that way. All right, see you in the next video.